Hello, I'm Kylie Hatterley. Today, I would like to introduce and explain the importance of Jessica's Law, especially in the state of Idaho, because present Idaho laws have no mandatory minimum sentencing, do not require a sex offender to wear a monitoring device, and have insufficient buffer zone restrictions between the sexual offender and the places where children gather. The state of Idaho needs to adopt Jessica's Law to protect innocent children. To begin, I would like to inform you of a tragic story. 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford was found raped, bound, and buried alive in the fetal position, clutching a purple stuffed dolphin. Police found her body in a shallow grave under the back porch of a trailer house less than 150 yards from her own home when convicted sex offender John Huey confessed to killing her. Jessica had disappeared from her bedroom at her grandparents' home in the middle of the night on February 23, 2005. Had her father, Mark Lunsford, been aware that a convicted sex offender lived just down the block, he would have made sure that they had locked their doors before they went to bed. Tragically, law enforcement lost track of Huey weeks earlier because he had moved from the address he had registered with the police, and he was staying in a double-wide trailer with his sister just yards from Jessica's home. If John Huey had been wearing an electronic monitoring device, law enforcement would have been able to track his every move, making it too risky to kidnap a child. In response to the horrific death of Jessica Lunsford, lawmakers both locally and across the nation have taken quick action, and many states have passed a new law named in memory of child victim Jessica Marie Lunsford, which mandates a mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years for first-time sex offenders convicted of lewd and lascivious molestation of a child under the age of 12 and requires them to wear an electronic monitoring device for life. Unfortunately, Idaho is only one in 5 states in the nation that has been classified as heading in the wrong direction by Bill O'Reilly. State representatives have compared Idaho's law to Jessica's law and have found that they are similar in a number of areas and even more severe in a number of aspects. However, Idaho's law does not require a mandatory minimum sentence for first-time offenders and does not have a requirement for electronic monitoring, which are arguably the most protective aspects of Jessica's law. According to Brian Fisher, the executive director of the American Family Association, without mandatory minimum sentences, lenient judges have allowed sex offenders back onto the street to commit these crimes again and again, essentially giving the offender one free child molestation pass. In another tragic incident, a man in Minnesota, Joseph Duncan, was accused of molesting a young boy. The judge released Duncan on just $15,000 bail. Duncan quickly posted the bond, skipped bail, and headed for Idaho, where he kidnapped, raped, and killed 9-year-old Dylan Green, molested his sister, and murdered both of their parents. Following Duncan's arrest, it was discovered that he'd been keeping an internet blog. Quote, "I got out and I got even, but I didn't get caught, so I got even again and again." End quote. The FBI has determined that Duncan might have been involved in murders and deaths of children in at least 5 different states, including Idaho. If Jessica's law had existed in the first state where Duncan was convicted of sexual rape of a child, he would have never been allowed to come to Idaho to rape and murder children here. Having no mandatory minimum for first-time sex offenders becomes even more threatening because, unbelievably, Idaho's laws do not require electronic monitoring of registered sex offenders after their time is served. This is in sharp contrast to Jessica's law, which requires electronic monitoring for life. Ernie Allen, the president of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, says this about the global positioning system. "It is a vital tool for knowing where sex offenders are, to ensure that the offenders are going to their jobs and living where they're supposed to live and doing the things they're supposed to do. Child molesters, unfortunately, do not possess an organized criminal profile. They come from all classes and backgrounds. Some might be married, some might not. Some might prefer boys, while others prefer girls. Sometimes they are attracted to young children, and other times they are attracted to older children. It is not enough just to require sex offenders to register. It is critical that law enforcers are able to access a predator's whereabouts at any time. For these reasons, the use of a GPS monitoring device to track an offender's every move is invaluable. Whether or not they are male or female, attracted to younger or older children, the GPS will know where they are constantly. One more flaw in Idaho's sex offender laws, when being compared to Jessica's law, deals with the distance a sex offender is required to keep between himself and places where children gather, such as schools and parks. Idaho's law requires a 500-foot buffer zone, whereas Jessica's law mandates a 2,000-foot buffer zone. Though it may seem like adding an extra 1,500 feet to the buffer zone would not make much of a difference in protecting Idaho's children from predators, when being compared to a football field, which is 300 feet, the extra 1,500 feet seems like an enormous distance. If a predator is trying to stalk a child, then clearly 500 feet is not an adequate buffer zone distance. The distance Idaho law requires is currently close enough that a figure of a person can be made out by the naked eye. Also, a person or a predator with binoculars can even see specific features of a child. Although Idaho does require sex offenders to register their current address, authorities have no way of knowing if a sexual offender is breaking Idaho's buffer zone law. Therefore, because of sex offender statutes do not decrease the chance of predators from reoffending, sexual criminals should not be let out of jail where they can harm more children. Idaho needs Jessica's law to prevent sex offenders from moving to a state where sexual predator laws are less stringent. Once a child predator becomes aware of the weaknesses in Idaho's sex offender laws, Idaho's quiet setting may attract the John Hueys and Joseph Duncans of this world. To keep children safe from devious sex offenders, Idaho needs to have a mandatory minimum of 25 years sentence for first-time offenders. Predators released from their sentence should be tracked with an electronic monitoring device, and a safe distance should be kept between the predators and the places where children gather. It is inevitable that Jessica's law will save lives, both physically and emotionally. In order for Idaho to protect its children, they must be firm with those who hurt children, making it too dangerous for them to reoffend. As Bill O'Reilly warns, this is literally a life and death battle to save our youngest and most vulnerable citizens from abuse, torture, and murder. It's impossible to quantify the loss of any individual, especially one as beautiful and innocent as a young child. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments regarding Jessica's law or Idaho's law, please comment below.